If you have ever deployed a critical application only to realize a typo in your appsettings.json, which brought the whole thing down, or maybe you needed to turn off a broken feature in production and you had to wait for 20 minutes CI/CD pipeline to redeploy the fix just to change one boolean value. We have all been there. As our system grow from single monoliths to distributed microservices, managing configurations becomes a massive headache. Today we are going to solve that problem completely. I'm going to show you how to centralize, secure, and dynamically update your application settings without ever restarting your app using Azure App Configuration. We will look at the architectural benefits and then jump straight into the .NET 10 code to see how it works in reality. Here is our plan for today. We will start with a quick introduction to what is Azure App Configuration actually is and why you should care. Then we will walk through provisioning the service in the Azure portal and adding our first pieces of configuration. After that, we will dive into the code. I will show you exactly how to wire this up securely in your application, followed by a live demo to see the how dynamic configuration refreshes in action. To follow along with today's build, you only need a few things. Make sure you have Visual Studio fired up with ASP.NET Web Development Workload installed. You will need an active Azure account. The free tier is perfectly fine for this. Ensure you have the .NET 10 SDK installed as we will be using the latest features and just a basic understanding of C Sharp and Azure Resource Management. By the way, welcome back to the dotNetMirror channel. If you are building scalable applications and want weekly real world architectural deep dives, hit that subscribe button and click the bell icon so you don't miss any of our upcoming videos. So, what is Azure App Configuration? Think of it as a single source of truth for all your application settings. When you have five microservices, you don't want five separate appsetting.json files scattered everywhere, creating a configuration drift. But it's more than a just key value store. The two biggest superpowers are dynamic refresh and feature flags. Dynamic refresh allows your application to poll Azure for changes and update its internal configurations at runtime. No IIS restart or no container rebuild. You might be wondering, what about passwords and API keys? App configuration is built to work with Azure Key Vault, not to replace it. You store your plain text settings like batch sizes or feature toggles in app config, and you store your database passwords in Key Vault. App config can actually link directly to Key Vault secrets, so your app code only ever has to query one place. Setting Azure App Configuration in the Azure is incredibly straightforward. In the Azure portal, just search for App Configuration. When naming your resource, I highly recommend adopting strict naming convention early on, something like appconfig.yourproject.environment name. For this tutorial, selecting the free tier is perfect, but keep in mind that for production, the standard tier is required if you need higher request limits and SLAs. The most critical step here is access control. By default, even if you create the resource, you might not have a data plane access to view the keys. You need to ensure your account is granted with the app configuration data owner role under the access control blade. Once it is provisioned, we head over to the configuration explorer. This is where you manually add or import your keys. Instead of flat keys, you want to use hierarchies. For example, instead of a key named maximum items, use app settings colon max items. This maps perfectly to the configuration provider in .NET, allowing you to bind these settings directly to strong type C# classes later. Also pay attention to the labels. You can have the exact same key names like database timeout, but give one label as dev, the other one is prod. Your application then instructed to only pull the keys matching its current environment. Let's talk about managed identity. This is important slide from a security perspective. We are not going to use the connection string. Passing connection strings around how credentials leak into source control. Instead, we use Azure Managed Identities. When deployed, your app service or container is assigned to a Azure Active Directory identity. We simply grant that identity permission to read our configuration. To make our lives easier during local development, we use a class called DefaultAzureCredential. This is pure magic. When you run the app locally, it uses your Visual Studio or Azure CLI login to authenticate. When you push it to Azure, it automatically detects the managed identity and uses that instead. Zero code changes between the environments. To wire all this up, we only need to pull two packages. First, Microsoft.azure.appconfiguration.asp.NET Core. This provides the extension methods for our program.cs file. Secondly, Azure.identity, which contains default Azure credential class, we just talked about. Run these through your CLI or a NuGet package manager, and we are ready to code. Let's look at the .NET 10 program.cs integration. Notice how clean this is. First, we grab our Azure endpoint URI from our local appsettings.json. Yes, we still have a local settings file, but it only contains the URL pointing to Azure, no secrets, no business logic configurations. Next, we call add Azure App Configuration. We pass it to our endpoint and initialize a new default Azure credential. Now look at the configuration client options block. This is crucial for resilience. We are setting our network timeout retry logic. In a cloud native world, transient network faults happens. If Azure pauses for a millisecond, we don't want our app to crash on startup. We are explicitly telling the client to handle those retries gracefully. Finally, just like a standard local configuration, we use builder.services.configure to map the incoming JSON like structure from Azure into a strongly typed C# object like external services, making it injectable anywhere in our app. We talked more on the slides. Now let's see in this action. I'm going to switch over to Visual Studio. I have got a basic ASP.NET application up and running. In my previous video, I talked about how to read app settings in locally and how to deploy that to Azure App Service, and this is the code base. I'm going to use the similar code base structure here. You can go and watch my previous video. Also, I have a different video which talks about how to read connection string from the Azure Key Vault. I will provide the link in the description. You can go and watch. In the Visual Studio, I have created the application similar to this repo, and this is basic ASP.NET application. And if you go to appsetting.json, we have two settings over here in the external services. One is API base URL, the other one is title. And if you go to index.html, we are trying to inject I configuration and we are directly reading those configurations from here. Let's run this application. The app is up and running locally. You can see the two settings value from appsettings.json. One is the URL and the other one is the title. Now let's go and create Azure App Configuration. We will move these two settings to Azure App Configuration, deploy the app to Azure App Service, and within the Azure App Service, we will try to read the configurations from Azure App Configuration. Now I logged into Azure portal. Go and search for app configuration. Select app configuration. Click on create. Let's create a new resource group. Select your subscription. Select the region nearest to you. Let's pick up a name. For the demo purpose, let me select the free plan. Let's click on review and create. In the same resource group, let's create the app service as well. Let's select the web app. I'm selecting the same resource group. Let's give the name. Let's select .NET 10. Let's select the same region as app configuration. I already have a free plan. I'll try to use it. Let's create the app. Let's go to the resource group. Now if you see here, our app configuration is created. Now let's go and add our key value pairs. If you go to the configuration explorer, it says we don't have access to add the keys. Go to the access control. Let's go to the role assignments. In the role assignments, you can see here my account already have owner, but I'm not able to add it. As I mentioned in the slides, you have to explicitly add app configuration data owner. So let's add role assignment. Search for configuration, select app configuration data owner. If you see here, it says allow full access to app configuration data. Let's click on next. Let's select my account. Click on select, review and assign. If you see here, now our account is added to app configuration data owner. Let's go to the configuration explorer. Now if you see here, it says updating your access. It takes 10 to 15 minutes. Let's come back. In the resource group, now the app service is created. Let's go and deploy our app. Let's browse the app. So this is a basic HTML file. It says your app is up and running. Now in order to deploy from Visual Studio, you have to go and enable these checkboxes. Let's do that. Let's go to the Visual Studio. Let's deploy to Azure App Service. Let's select Azure App Service Windows. As it's connected to my Azure account, it will show all our app services. Ours is this resource group. So let's select the web app. Let's click on finish. Let's go and deploy. Now our app is getting published to Azure. Now the app is deployed to Azure App Service, and you can see the values from the code. Now let's do a quick step. Let's go to the environment variables. So instead of Azure App Configuration, I'll show you how to add in Azure App Settings. So instead of local, let me call it as app setting. Let's apply. Let's add one more. Now let's save these settings. Click on apply, confirm. Now let's refresh the app. Now if you see here, instead of local, now it is reading from the Azure App Service app settings. Now what we will do is same values we will try to put in Azure App Configuration. We will try to read them. Let's go to the app configuration. Click on Configuration Explorer. Now the key values are available here. Let's go and add our key value pairs. Let me take from the app settings. Let's put the key. So instead of app setting, I'll say app config. As I mentioned in the slides, you can use label for dev and production. I will keep it blank. Let's create the other one. Let's change the value, app configuration. Click on apply. Now the key values got added. Let's go and integrate this code. Let me take this endpoint URL. In the appsetting.json, let's add this endpoint. Let's add the app configuration URL here. Let's do the code changes in Program.cs to read app configuration data. Before that, we need to add the packages. Let's add the NuGet packages to read the app configuration data. Let's add the second package. Required packages got added to our solution. Let's go to Program.cs. Let's say use Azure.identity. Before the build method, now let's refer to app configuration endpoint and read the configurations. So this is to read the endpoint from the configuration file. Now let's load the configuration from Azure App Configuration. For that you say builder.configuration.add Azure App Configuration, and let's click on tab, and let me add the code related to timeout. And if you look at the code here, we are trying to read the endpoint of app configuration. We are using default Azure credentials to read the data locally. and we are using configure client connections, and we are trying to increase the network timeout for slow network connections. Now let's put a comment. Now we need to read the settings from Azure App Configuration, and let's try to inject to our C# class. So I'll go and create one C# class. Let's click on add a new class. Let's call it as setting.cs. Now let's go to appsetting.json. This name should match with your class name, so make it a class. Then let's create couple of properties. Let's make it a string, and let's copy these values. The other one is title. Let's put that. Here we are only reading it, so let's put like a get. So now we defined a class called external services, and with these two settings, now we will try to read the data from app configuration to this particular class. Let's go to Program.cs. Just say builder.services.configure. Yeah, if you see here, this is our class, and we are reading from the app configuration with a section called external services. Within the app configuration, things with all external services will be binded to this particular class. So let's put a comment. Yeah, now we are done with the code changes. Let's run the app. Now the app is up and running. Now if you see here, instead of local settings from our appsetting.json, it is trying to read from the app config from the Azure. Now let's go and deploy this particular app. Before I deploy our app configuration changes to the Azure, if you see here, our Azure web app currently is reading settings from Azure App Service app settings. Now let's go and deploy our Azure app configuration changes. Instead of app settings, it should come from the app configuration. Let's click on publish. As we already connected to our publish profile, it is displaying here. So let's click on publish. Now the app is published. Now if you see here, we are getting 50 internal server error. That is because Azure App Service is not able to talk to app configuration. Now we need to enable the managed identity. So let's go to the Azure portal. First, we need to enable managed identity on web app. Let's go to identity, click on this system identity as on, click on save. In the background, it goes and creates an app registration. Now let's go back to our Azure app configuration. Let's go to access control. Click on add role assignment. Previously, we have given data owner to our account because we need to add configuration. But this time our app service is only reading the data. So I'll give only data reader access. Instead of user, please select managed identity, select on members. Here now you should be able to see our app services. Click on app services. Select app service. From the list of app services, our app service is DNM app config web app. Let's select that. Click on select. Click on review and assign. If you go to role assignments, here for my account we have given data owner because we need to add configurations. But for our web app, we are saying only give data reader so that it goes and connects to app configuration and reads our config files. Let's go to the browser. Let's refresh. Now if you see here, our Azure web app is able to read the data from Azure app configuration like how we did locally with default Azure credentials. Now it is able to get the data from Azure app configuration. I have my previous version also. Previously we were reading from Azure app settings. With the latest code deployment, now we can see the data from Azure app configuration. In this way, with managed identity, you can read data from Azure app configuration to Azure app service. With this, we are done with the demo. Let's go back to the PPT. Let's recap our bullet points. To wrap up, Azure App Configuration pulls your settings out of your deployment artifacts and put them into a centralized manageable service By leveraging dynamic refresh and feature flags, you decouple your code deployments for your configuration changes, meaning faster and safer rollouts. When we pair with managed identity, your security drastically improves because there are zero secrets living in your code base. It does add a network dependency, so for a tiny single instance app, it might be overkill. But the moment you scale past a single microservices or need to manage multiple environments, it becomes an absolute necessity. Thank you so much for watching. The link to the full source code used in today's demo is down in the description below. If you found this video helpful, please drop a like on the video and share it with your team. Keep building, keep learning, and I will see you in the next one.